Okay, so you ready to dive into this whole thing about confidence and carelessness?
I'm ready.
It's an interesting one, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, going through everything you sent over,
Yeah.
I can definitely see why this topic caught your eye.
Yeah,
There's a lot to unpack here. There's a lot to think about.
absolutely.
So one thing that really jumped out at me from your notes was this idea that confidence, it's not always enough on its own.
Yeah,
It's like confidence needs this foundation to actually be effective.
that's true.
And I love this phrase that you use. You said, taking an action balls deep with no backup plan.
Yeah.
That's not confident.
No, that's carelessness, right?
That's carelessness. That's
Yeah.
recklessness.
Yeah. I think confidence is really more about understanding the risks involved and making a choice.
Yeah, like an informed decision,
Right, making an informed decision.
not just kind of blindly jumping into things.
Exactly.
It's almost like that saying, measure twice, cut once. Like, you can still be confident in your ability to make the cut, but you're taking the time to understand the situation before you do.
Yeah.
And that's where this whole weighing the pros and cons comes in,
Mm.
which you talk about quite a bit in your notes.
Yeah.
It's like that classic cost-benefit analysis.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, even if you're feeling super confident about something, you still need to take a step back and look at the potential downsides.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious, what comes to mind for you when you think about that? What's a situation where you had to weigh the risks, even though you're feeling really confident?
Yeah, it makes me think about all those times when you feel really good about something, but you maybe didn't have all the information,
Yeah.
and how that can lead to making a not so great decision.
Yeah, like that time you went all in on that stock option.
Oh, yeah.
Like, how did you weigh those risks and rewards in that situation?
Right. Well, I thought I was so smart.
Right.
I had all this information, I had all this data, but looking back, I definitely could have been a little more careful.
So it's really about responsible decision making.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not just about being confident,
Mm-hmm.
but about making smart choices.
Right.
Now, something else that was really interesting to me from your notes was this idea that a relaxed attitude can actually be both a strength and a weakness,
Oh, yeah, for sure.
which seems kind of counterintuitive, doesn't it?
It does.
Like, how can being relaxed be a bad thing?
Right. Well, it makes me think about, like you see in a nature documentary, those gazelles that are just calmly grazing while there's lions all around.
Oh, yeah.
They're relaxed, but they're also alert, and it works for them. But if they get too relaxed,
Yeah.
they become lunch.
Well, that's not good.
Not so good.
So where do you see that play out in your own life?
Mm-hmm.
Like, when does your relaxed demeanor help you, and when does it maybe not work so well?
Yeah. I think for me, it's about knowing when to turn it on and off. Like, I can be really laid back in most situations, but there are times when I need to be more focused and intense.
Right. Like, you don't want to be too relaxed if you're, say, negotiating a big deal
Right, exactly.
or, performing surgery or something.
Oh, yeah, that's a good example.
You probably don't want to be too chill.
You want to be calm. Yeah.
You want to be calm but not careless.
Right.
And I think that goes back to what we were saying earlier about knowing yourself,
Yeah.
like understanding your own tendencies and when you need to adjust your approach.
Absolutely.
And speaking of tendencies, you mentioned in your notes that you sometimes have this tendency to underestimate situations,
Oh, yeah.
especially like with those game design projects you were talking about.
I'd go into a project thinking, oh, yeah, this is going to be easy. I got this.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
But then I'd hit a wall.
Yeah,
And I'd realize I'd underestimated the complexity of it all.
I think we've all been there.
We've all been there.
It's so easy to do that, isn't it?
It is.
So what did those experiences teach you about the balance between confidence and carefulness?
I think it taught me that even with confidence, you still need to plan. You still need to be prepared.
Yeah,
And you need to be adaptable because things change.
they do. They always do.
Yeah.
It's almost like you need to have this confidence in your skills, but also this humility to know that you might not have all the answers.
Absolutely.
You have to be open to learning and adjusting along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And that leads perfectly to another point you brought up, which is this need to be both serious and easygoing.
Yeah. I like that.
It's an interesting one, isn't it?
It is. It's like having different tools in your toolbox.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Right. Like
Right.
sometimes you need a hammer.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need a screwdriver.
Totally. So how do you decide which tool to use in a given situation?
Well, for me, it depends on the context.
Yeah.
Like if it's a situation that calls for focus and attention, I'll tap into that serious side.
Okay.
But if it's more about collaboration and creativity, I'll lean into that easygoing approach.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, you also talked about those situations where Maybe you're working with someone who doesn't share your level of concern.
Oh, right.
Like
Mhm.
they're just more laid back about something than you are. How do you navigate that?
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that not everyone sees the world the same way that you do,
Yeah.
right? Some people are just naturally more cautious, some people are more carefree, and that's okay.
It's about respecting those differences.
Exactly. It's about respecting those differences and finding a way to communicate effectively.
Right. And it probably depends on the situation, too.
It does.
Like if it's something really important that you're concerned about, you probably want to make sure your perspective is heard.
Yeah,
But if it's something small, maybe you can let it go.
right.
Which is funny because you also talk about how hard it can be to let go of the small stuff sometimes.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I'm all for not sweating the small stuff, but it's definitely a work in progress for me.
Yeah, for me too. It's like this inner conflict.
Yeah.
I know it's not always productive to get hung up on every little detail,
Mm-hmm.
but sometimes it's hard to let go.
It is.
Like you know it matters.
Right.
So how do you deal with that?
Well, I think mindfulness helps. Like just being aware of your thoughts and feelings without judgment, and then deciding, which ones are worth giving your energy to.
So it's not about ignoring those thoughts and feelings, but it's about choosing how you respond to them.
Exactly.
Another thing you brought up was this idea that too much optimism can actually be a bad thing.
Oh, yeah.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, well, optimism's great. It's important to have hope and to believe in possibilities.
Yeah.
But if you're not careful, it can blind you to potential problems.
Right. It's like you're so focused on the positive that you miss the red flags.
Exactly.
So how do you find that balance between being optimistic and also being realistic?
I think it's about being aware of your own biases. Like if you tend to be overly optimistic, you can make a conscious effort to consider the potential downsides.
So you're not trying to squash your optimism, but you're trying to temper it with a bit of realism.
Yeah, exactly.
And, I love that quote you shared that said, I am just giving a certain amount of time in this world, and then someday I will definitely die.
Yeah.
So I should do my best and then let it go.
I love that quote.
Yeah, that really stuck with me.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like what we've really been talking about here is this delicate dance between confidence and carelessness.
Yes.
It's about being willing to take risks, but with your eyes wide open.
Absolutely.
About being optimistic,
Yeah.
but grounded in reality.
Yeah.
And most importantly, about knowing yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Like understanding your strengths and weaknesses
Yeah.
and where those tendencies might lead you astray.
Right.
It's a journey, isn't it?
It is. It's a lifelong journey of self-discovery.
Well, on that note, we're just about out of time, but before we go, I'm curious what resonated with you the most from this conversation. What one thing are you going to take away and apply to your own life? Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.
See you then.